Welcome to the Vocational Expert Views channel. Today we're going to discuss total disability, individual unemployability, or it's best known as TDIU. We're going to be looking at this in terms of Vocational Expert Evaluation for veterans seeking TDIU, so they know what a vocational expert is and why this is the professional service you need to be successful. So, what is a TDIU vocational evaluation? Well, to begin with, why are we doing this? We're doing this because over the last several months, there's been a measurable increase in demand for vocational expert services in VA disability. Now, approximately 10 to 15% of the veterans that are seeking our services, they're doing this kind of preemptively. They're doing the vocational assessment evaluations while they're trying to get a T&P increase in hopes that the vocational evaluation will get them to 100%. And if it doesn't, that they will go ahead and be granted for TDIU when they turn that paperwork in. In addition, a lot of these veterans are also asking about our psychological testing, and we can do psychological testing assessment for PTSD, depression, anxiety, as well as other mental health conditions. For veterans that want to see if their symptomology should be rated higher than the VA, now we will only do this if you are already primarily service connected or secondarily service connected for mental health conditions. Our psychological testing is greater than screeners. If you'll look through your VA records, vast majority of time, I don't think I've ever seen a true psychological test being done by a mental health counselor. It's all been screeners, and screeners are basically based on verbal reports of symptomology. They are a good step, and the VA does accept that up to a certain level for ratings. However, for higher ratings, you really need formable psychological testing, which is what we do. Our psychological tests have validity scales, which means they do test for faking bad, faking good, people maximizing situation. And because of this, technically, if you want to look at it, there is a pass or fail in component, which makes our psychological testing objective clinical evidence and not just purely subjective clinical evidence. So, when you do a screener or talk to a counselor or psychologist, because they're doing a clinical assessment, when you do reports of symptoms, they are clinically accepted. They are clinically evaluating your reported symptoms. Whereas when they do psychological testing, now it becomes more objective. And that's what we're doing. And so our psychological testing is at a much higher level of evidence. And so that's why our psychological tests can get an increase in your ratings. A lot of veterans are trying to get TDIU without getting a vocational expert, and they're getting denied. And the reason for that is the way things are written in your record aren't really in vocational terms. And that's what we're going to go through, which is why a vocational expert and a vocational evaluation is what you really need to get TDIU. So a lot of you already know this, so we're not going to go through this word by word, but TDIU is granted if your T&P is less than 100%, but your service-connected disabilities basically render you unemployable. So you need at least one service-connected disability rated at 60%, or multiple service-connected disabilities with one rated at least 40% or more. TDIU can be raised either expressly or inferred. A lot of veterans have become aware over the last 3 years or so, maybe since 2018 or 2019. A lot of veterans are directly filling out VA Form 218940 to get TDIU awarded. So unemployability is not a medical or psychological determination. And your VA doctors, as well as VA counselors, they're not or it's basically they should not give you an opinion on whether you're employable or not. And this is in VA appeals decision that they should not be looking at that. Whereas a vocational expert, we are the appropriate expert to opine on how disabilities affect employability and vocational issues. So, what can a vocational expert do for you? And you're going, well, I have VA raters, I got VA doctors or private doctors, I got mental health providers or physical therapists. What are they not doing? What they cannot do? Well, when they're looking at VA disability, they're looking at each service-connected issue in isolation. And they're really looking at how that disability disrupts your daily functions. So they're looking at your activities of daily living, which is known as ADLs, and how your service-connected disability limits your functional ability in your overall life. And work is part of that, but not the primary focus. So they're looking at all aspects. And when they're doing TMP ratings, they're looking at one disability individually. Whereas with a vocational expert, we're able to look at all your service-connected disabilities and how they interact with each other. We're also able to isolate non-service-connected issues. So a lot of veterans are getting denied because the raters are going, well, you're not employable because of this or because of this. Whereas with a vocational expert, we're able to isolate those issues out. So vocational experts are looking at your service-connected issues and how they affect your ability to work. So we are addressing employability directly. So unemployability is different from unemployment, and a lot of people don't really understand this. Can the veteran secure or follow a job? Well, one of the things you look at is, the veteran's not able to get hired, but everybody can do a bad interview on purpose. Everybody can show up looking disheveled. Are you not getting hired because of something you do on purpose, or is this something that's really directly caused by your disability? The veteran cannot keep a job once hired. But again, is this on purpose? Is this a volitional issue? Or is this something truly connected to your service-connected disability? And this is why a vocational expert is really needed to try to separate these issues out. The other component they're looking at is substantially gainfully employed. With Social Security, it's called SGA. With the VA, they're looking at a number around the poverty level. So there are some people who get TDIU that are kind of sort of working. It's really a gray zone and extremely hard. It's really best if you're not working when you apply for TDIU. And only vocational experts are trained on how to assess disability in terms of employability as well as in terms of competitive employment. So TDIU is individualized to the veteran. And why this is important, I know this is written on, but why this is important is a lot of your VA raters and your VA doctors, they're really looking at the average person, and they're not really looking how your disabilities are affecting you at the individual level. Whereas if you get a vocational expert to do an assessment, we're looking at it at a truly individual level. So when you're looking at TDIU, the VA is looking at your employment history. What kind of work have you done in the past? What have you tried to do? What have you applied for? They're also looking at your education. It's not just the extent of formal schooling before your disability or before you got in the military, but also after. They're also looking at vocational skills or specialized training. So a lot of people believe, okay, I'm disabled and I can't do my job, but they really don't understand that at some level it's any occupation, not your own occupation, any occupation. Now, the VA is not to consider a veteran's age or retirement status, or if you're currently attending college. But there's a caveat with that. If you're saying that I can't work in or with or around people, but you're attending classes in person, that's a major issue. And unless you get a vocational expert in there to really assess that, you're going to have a major bar to overcome if you're trying to say, I can't work with people, but you're going to class in person. So, how a vocational expert and TDIU evaluation can help you. Well, we're looking at your service-connected issues, especially your mental health issues, and relating them into vocational terms and how they affect employability and overall work performance. So let's take a look at mental health. So many veterans are affected by depression. And of course, in our example, this is service connected depression. Sometimes depression is a primary issue or primary connected. Sometimes the depression is a secondary issue. Now, if you have depression and it's a secondary issue, but you don't have it service connected, you need a nexus and you need to get that connected in order for that to be addressed with TDIU. As I stated earlier, we can do psychological testing to help increase, or if you have someone that can do a nexus, we might do psychological testing in that terms, but we're not going to do psychological evaluation and testing for a nexus letter. You'll need someone else to write that for you. However, whether your depression is connected primary or secondary, it's rated the same on your VA rating forms. So, major depressive disorder significantly impacts a person's ability to perform work tasks and maintain employment. There are cognitive issues, there's emotional issues, there are behavioral issues. And this leads to a range of vocational work limitations. So, a primary issue is cognitive limitations, staying on task, focusing, which means not making errors or making too many errors, the ability to make decisions, retaining information. Depression also affects reduced motivation or lack of energy, which is slow work pace. Fatigue, again, slow work pace, as well as negative self-perception, which also can increase errors at work. So, depressive symptoms and impairment in work functioning. It's a study that was done in Canada, and 52% of the people stated that their depression affect their ability to think at work, and it was affecting them in their work performance. Another aspect of this study was these depressed workers were unable to work approximately 32 days over the past year, which basically meant 3 to 4 more times of work loss was due to their depression symptoms and not anything else. They were 2 to 3 more times likely to be on short-term disability. You may have heard of a term called presenteeism, and that was a very popular term approximately 7 or 8 years ago. You don't hear so much about it now. You do sometimes, but basically that's a person who's at work, but they're not focusing at work, so they have increased errors, slow work pace, and things like that. These are the issues the vocational expert can address directly that's being caused by your mental health issues that your other professionals cannot. So your VA doctors aren't able to talk about, being on task or missing work. Your counselors really can't talk about that. But if you get a vocational expert, we're able to discuss that. So this goes back to, who would you rather make the determination of your employability? Someone who has no training or understanding of vocational issues? For example, did they know what the selected characteristics of occupations is? Did they know what the basic 72 worker traits are? Do they know what the primary 4 mental demands of employment? There are others, but there are 4 primary mental demands, as well as other issues to obtain and maintain competitive employment. A person that isn't aware or cannot address what a competitive employment is, how can they know what's required to obtain or maintain it? And so this goes back to, a lot of times veterans are denied. It says, you can do a sedentary light duty job, whereas these raters and doctors, they don't know what the true definition of a sedentary or light duty job is, as well as, what are the factors of competitive employment. And this is why a vocational experts are needed, because this is where we are professional trained. We're trained in vocational issues as well as disability issues. So we go back to, what can a vocational expert do that your VA raters, doctors, and mental health providers or physical therapists cannot do? Well, we're able to relate your disabilities in vocational terms. We're not just looking at your functional aspect of the disability. We're looking at all aspects of your service-connected disability, and especially in terms of work. We're able to look at all your service-connected disabilities and how they interact with each other. We're able to isolate non-service-connected issues, and we're illuminating how these issues affect the ability to work. So we're addressing employability issues directly. So TDIU is focused on work and vocational issues, where your TMP is basically looking at functional ability. TDIU is looking at work and vocational issues. So can you prove through documentation today of your symptoms and how they're affecting your ability to obtain and maintain employment, which is basically unemployability? And 99% of you aren't, because your doctors aren't writing things in vocational terms, or you're not able to relate things in vocational terms. And when you're doing your statements, you're not relating things in true vocational terms. So TDIU is individualized to how your particular service-connected disabilities and what your vocational limitations you have, and in terms of being able to obtain and maintain employment. Only a vocational expert can explain your service-connected issues, whether they be physical or mental health issue, in vocational terms, how they affect you personally, and your ability to obtain and maintain work. We have over 20 years experience as a certified vocational expert and over 10 years experience as a Social Security disability vocational expert. So we know what types of evidence is needed to be highlighted from your file and what to assess. We can do psychological testing, and we're not just talking screeners for depression, anxiety, and PTSD. We're talking high-level clinical tests that have validity scales. So if you would like to schedule a consultation today, do so, because if TDI is right for you, we're able to help. TDIU Vocational Expert Evaluation. So the first step is you need to schedule a personal consultation about your TDIU application so we can discuss what evidence you have, what records you currently have, and how they affect you. And when you do this, we'll give you a basic intake form so we can look at your work history and the things you have. If everything looks good at step 1, then step 2 is we'll do a full evaluation of your medical and psychological records. So this is where you'll send more of your records in with us, and we'll start looking over that. Step 3 is kind of like an ongoing process, and we'll know if this is needed on step 1, but do you need psychological or other testing? For example, we do ADHD testing, which is basically focusing on concentration, ability to take in information and things like that. So a lot of veterans really need more information about, are they able to stay on task, and we're able to do that. And then if everything goes well, there's step 4, we'll get a vocational evaluation report.